We are now live with this Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay 2nd edition one-shot. So we'll go around, it's as yet unnamed, and introduce our player characters.
I am playing Conrad Alder, but he goes by the name Hawk. He is the chieftain of the Plains tribes of the Empire.
All right.
I am Equidari. I will be playing General Heinrich Volt of the Argent Bulwark, to stem the tide of that which approaches.
Yes, and a tide
extraordinaire.
And a tide most foul it is, for we will journey with them to Wissenland in the southwestern corner of the Empire, nestled between the gray mountains and the black. And as we can zoom in on that corner, we can see Rotenbach, where the Hawk has his dominion over this plains area. But closer down, again, into that corner, right where the black mountains of the orcs become the gray mountains of the dwarfs, there is Winter's Teeth Pass, the pass to Bretonia, the pass which will shortly spew forth a goblinoid army of massive proportions, possibly overwhelming Weilerberg, home of House Feidler, and then spreading its evil and mayhem back to the rest of Wissenland. It is for this reason that these four great armies have massed here together. The Feidlers, in defense of their own homeland, have come together with their arch rivals, the Krebs of Osthausen, of Icy Wind Pass, as well as our two heroes. So you guys are now marching down towards this corner. The terrain is growing hillier. You've passed through the forests. You can see the mountains looming up above you. And seated at the cleft, actually, I'll see if I have a portrait of Weilerberg. I actually might have a portrait of Weilerberg. This is from a previous campaign of mine. And I do. I have some art. Always rely upon me to have art at the ready. So this is exactly what it's looking like as you're heading forth. Maybe less smoke than that. But you can see the pass looming ahead, and you can see the city nestled there. It does have a town wall, a city wall built around it. And indeed, it also has a great keep. And in ages past, you know, that has certainly been the bastion of defense for this pass, but it's not sufficient as a fortification to stop the goblins from coming through, although it has been in the past sufficient to protect the people. And of course, you see the flag of House Feidler flying high overhead, the green and blue, decorating the parapets. But what is the disposition of your force as you're coming in? What would an observer on the castle wall see marching towards the gates of Weilerberg?
So spread across a wide swath of this upcoming valley, of the mouth of this large valley, is this what can only be described as a horde of these tribal plains people, perhaps slightly coming out, being dragged out of the Bronze Age. These people are many and varied, as they are led by several different lesser chieftains. But these people are mostly a tribal people. They wear light skins of perhaps reindeer and horse hair helmets. upon their heads. Most travel on foot, and dust, a great dust settles above, almost a cloud of dust settles above these peoples who mostly walk on foot, followed by this large, all the way in the back, this large amount of people who are not even fighters. There are many women and children that follow, as this is, entire tribes have shown up to defend their lands. For if their lands are taken, their lives are taken. So everyone has shown up, including women and children as well. But throughout this great horde, interspersed in their midst are large chariots of iron and bronze being pulled by great magnificent reindeer. And these people, these elite warriors who stand upon the chariots are the greatest of their tribe, who have risen above to become great masters of speed, lightning attacks, coming forward to meet the enemy with bravery and audacity. These are strong, magnificent men and women that ride on chariot back. On one of these grand chariots, we see the hawk, the great wizened leader of this great confederation of tribes. He's a man who stands at a large 6'2". He is mostly lean and lanky of build. He has a great, magnificent beard that is just starting to turn from this yellow, almost blonde color that's starting to turn slightly white with age and wisdom. He has sun-beaten, sun-bleached hair, sun-bleached skin, and blue eyes that peer out across the plains with some amount of pride, seeing his tribes marching to battle with a unified purpose to defend the creatures and the peoples who live upon the plains. He also wears this great cloak, this magnificent cloak that he has drawn about him of feathers, where he gets his name. There are feathers from the red-tailed hawk and other sorts of hawks that do dwell upon the forests and the mountain tops. Magnificent cloak. He, of course, has long, unkempt hair that is very wild. But and in his hand, he carries perhaps a great sword that was taken from an enemy who dared try to defile the lands of his peoples. A great, massive steel sword.
The Feidlers are well known for their use of the greatsword. Could this have been taken from one of their commanders?
Indeed. It came from not only a commander, but a lesser family member. So perhaps there will be some tension there. But right. He keeps it in good shape. But it is a magnificent long sword. Or more than a long sword, it's more of a great sword, almost something you would use as a spear. It's so large.
All right, and looking down from the parapets of the castle, watching this motley assortment of fur-clad barbarians and their chariots, the Baron, Ernest Feidler, shakes his head. He's watching. He's trying to see, are any of them wearing armor? He's not sure. Some of them, he's sure they're bringing their women with them. What kind of army is this? They have little cavalry, but these strange rolling contraptions, something he might have learned about in history class. And he's just shaking his head as he watches this stream come forth into his city walls. What is he allowing to become a part of his kingdom, of his barony, just to save it from these goblinoid menace? But perhaps, Nick, you can describe what is the next force that is entering the city, perhaps behind the barbarians, or perhaps they're already there.
Already assembled in tents, and or we are in the city. We have upon many carts and great wagons loaded the tools and accoutrements of war, of battlefield survival, tents, armaments, ammunition, and the like, in this encampment made in perhaps the square or the courtyard of this establishment, of this bastion. You see the multicolored garmentry, the colorful, poofy sleeves and thigh garments tucked into boots and high leggings and other such assortments in greens and yellows and blues. There are pikemen aplenty, mixed amongst fusiliers, musketeers, individuals with the uniform, with the garments of a respected force in this in the empire here of chivalric, if one might call it that, warfare. Great wide-brimmed hats, each adorned with feathers, some with tassels and trails upon them. Upon the right shoulder, going down to the left side of the waist, each man has a great metallic colored sash going across their person, tied up or pinned upon them with a shining pin that bears the insignia of this mercenary group, the Argent Bulwark. And standing upon one of the great wagons piled high with materials, rations, and supplies is Heinrich Voigt, who, the only man with a red sash and with a shinier medallion upon his shoulder, is barking out orders, calling for movements, for the arrangement, deployment of what must be done in the hours to come. But those who are close to these men, despite the noble bearing of their arms and armaments, great, well-fashioned doublets over mail, a few individuals with actual breastplates, the demeanor of the men within these clothes, perhaps their noble, the heart that beats in their chest is not as noble as perhaps their illustrious appearance might indicate. There's a rough around the edges quality. There's spitting, there's swearing, there's rude and lewd looks from these men who have been all across these lands and back again, fighting border skirmishes, knightly intrigues, and courtly battles for petty border disputes and the like. But we shall see how they fare.
And indeed, looking on, perhaps from one of the taverns where his own men have taken their headquarters, is Marcel, the Hammer of Wissenland, Crab, Baron of House Crab, the Lord of Osshausen, and the Steward of Icy Wind Pass. He smiles approvingly, looking at your men's fine equipment, looking at how you've posted guard over your supplies, looking at how you've actually brought supplies, unlike the barbarians which are now streaming into the city.
Oh, as a note, we have like wagons of supplies, but like they're with women and children. You know,
Yeah.
so.
Well, Marcel has also kept his force highly disciplined, although his force is quite small, only slightly perhaps larger than the Argent Bastion. But they are, of course, bearing the white ram of House Crab. Their motto, cold as the icy wind. Apparently, I need to spell check this next time because it says cod as the icy wind. But it is cold as the icy wind, the white and blue of his companies. Now, let me ask you this, General Heidenreich. Have you ever perhaps been employed by Marcel Crab, perhaps against your current host?
I have indeed. I find myself upon the opposite side of employment this day, although I am well aware of that. But I am not, since I have not had to face any of the men in question close or face to face yet. I'm trying not to let it bother me what how this situation might affect the battle to come, or might affect my my own pay from this situation. We'll see.
All right. And was that previous encounter where Marcel hired you to battle Ernest Fiedler, was that a successful campaign, or did the Fiedlers run you off?
I'm going to say it was successful, which might deepen feelings of disapproval and of antagonism that might occur.
All right. So you've now all come into Weilerberg. You're under the auspices of Ernest Fiedler, a man who all three of you have fought before. And at least three of you have won victories at times in the past, though the Fiedlers are a most tenacious opponent, and perhaps they have taken revenge upon the Hawk, as they certainly have done in the past against Marcel and House Crab. It's been a long blood feud between these two houses for centuries in this region. They're the two main powers of the region. Is there anything you wanted to add or describe before we cut to the war room to our diplomatic meeting?
No, although I also eye the encroaching dust cloud of sweaty heathens, screaming barbarians, and their wanton and rapacious ways of the plains. And I crinkle my nose up and snort disapprovingly as the gates actually open for these barbarians.
You're like waiting for them to attack.
I assign a couple more guards to the food and to some of the supplies that I have, not trusting these savages.
The people they set up their own yurts outside of the city gates. They set up their large communal family yurts and settle down to cook elk meat and deer meat and antelope meat, while I gesture, of course, to my greatest generals, or, well, as the greatest chieftains amongst our people. The badger, the tenacious, short, frenzied man of the badger, on my one hand, leading the infantry, and the reindeer himself, leading, of course, the chariot men. I bring these two very different men with me into the city gates to meet with these strange people who have no respect, of course, for nature or for any sort of tradition. And of course, I come forth off of my grand chariot and march in on foot.
I could just imagine the elk wearing the horns of power, these reindeer horns behind him, moving swiftly, this tall, lithe man. And of course, the badger with his face painted with the skins of 50 badgers upon his body, just this stinking, suspicious, furtive man following behind the hawk in his majestic feather cloak with his dust ward, that the dust will keep the evil spirits off of him.
Indeed, indeed. It is well known amongst my people that washing more than once a year is looked very much down upon. You bring yourself evil spirits upon yourself by washing more than once a year. It is an unhealthy and unwholesome practice. Indeed.
Absolutely.
I turn to my right hand man just before being called to the assembly. My stalwart right hand, Adelbern Riestler, who keep an eye on things to cover up all of the spoils and valuables, check the chests of gold and riches that we have, double the guard duty until we're ready to be deployed.
Absolutely. And as you all do move into Castle Weilerberg, you see again, their coat of arms hung upon the walls with the red bloody lion of House Feidler grappling with the pale emaciated goat of House Kreb. Although the Krebs, of course, must correct that we should have a ram, not a goat. And the Feidlers don't care to depict the difference. Their motto, of course, a mountain of corpses. And this castle is often known as the mountain of corpses, as the Feidlers inter their dead within the walls, that they may guard Castle Weilerberg forevermore. But as you pass the tapestries depicting these battles between goblins, between the Krebs, between other invaders, between barbarians, such as the Hawk, you eventually are led through to that meeting room, richly appointed with tapestries, and you have the servants of the house pressing upon you any food, any wine that you might desire, any ale or mead. If you would enjoy roast meat, you see a large map spread out on this great table. And behind the table there, of course, the Baron himself, Ernest Feidler, in red and green. He's a man probably in the prime of his life, with red hair, the red beard, He has a horrible burn over his right eye, which was inflicted upon him by goblins in the past when he was captured many years ago. Fortunately, he was rescued by his uncle. But as you were coming in, he greets you somewhat curtly. He's not a happy-looking man, but he does nod his head and he gestures for you to come in and sit. You almost feel his teeth grinding at this panoply of previous enemies of his house. And it's not long before the hammer arrives as well. Marcel Kreb, in the blue and white of his own house. You can see him glaring at the tapestries depicting his previous defeats at the hands of House Feidler. So these two men are kind of standing opposite each other. You can almost sense the tension between them, as if Ernest's dislike of the two of you is nothing compared to his hatred of Marcel Kreb. But as you are all present, he does begin speaking formally. As I've opened my halls to all of you today, as we stand against our common foe. I have given you meat and mead. The guest right is yours, and I expect you to repay it in kind. No harm will come to you, no matter how well deserved, as long as you stand here. When you set foot beyond these walls, I hope it is as friends and not enemies. Have a seat, gentlemen. And he takes his place at the table. Why don't you describe, if you care to, how do the heralds announce your characters, or what is your initial entrance like?
My character enters the hall, again looking around, very sharply, looking at even small noises draw my attention. Strange noises I've not heard for a long time. Sounds of metal clanging on metal, perhaps of people lapping up stuff out of bowls of food. Perhaps the metal armor of these people as they clang down the hallway. This loud booming noise of this herald. But of course the herald kind of almost tentatively comes up to my strong, tall character and perhaps tries to get a name out of me, asks my name, and I say, Hawk, call me Hawk, and this badger and elk beside me. So we of course are announced as such in a very strange manner. Perhaps even they add in chieftain. They need some sort of title, but I go by no title other than Hawk. But tentatively again, looking sharply this way and that, much as again almost in the way of a hawk, peering, perhaps even seeming to glare at each person in turn, which perhaps gets either maybe an angry reaction or a scared reaction depending on the person. But I finally turn my gaze upon these two chieftains, this goat man and this lion man. The lion and the goat again. I've not met either of these, but I have met a lion man.
All right, and what about General Heidenreich? What is your entrance onto this
And
war council?
in contrast to the indecision of what to call this barbarian man of the plains, I myself am announced with perhaps more titles than I deserve, or perhaps not. Heinrich Voigt, commander of the Landsknecht, High Fusilier, and General of the Argent Bulwark. And it is only me here within this room. My subordinates and my comrades in arms are outside. I have no second in this war room at the moment.
And as you enter, I don't take a seat. I kind of stand, perhaps awkwardly, near, not too close, but not too far from these two other men, the goat man and the lion man. I see this man. He is a man who is very flashy. He is more perhaps than I have seen in forever. He looks a songbird. Yes, that's what he looks like. He looks like a songbird, all with his bright plumage. I look upon this man in his garb, somewhat impressed by perhaps the way you have bedecked yourself. Perhaps he has taken on this aspect of the songbird. Interesting. But again, all you see is me just glaring at you. Again, perhaps hard to read my expression, but I do kind of just glare as you kind of march in.
I will mention neither Ernest nor Marcel is alone. Ernest has his uncles with him, Anton the Cave Bear, and Sir Isaac of the Order of Bellerophon, whereas Marcel has brought his sons, Sir Gabriel, who's also of the Order of Bellerophon, which is the largest local knightly order, and his other son, Sir Olaf the Cruel, who is not a member of any knightly order. So they're not alone. They certainly have good counsel, although both have such a strong reputation as leaders in their own right that their counsel may be somewhat silent.
I look upon the bear who I have fought before in the past with some respect. He defeated me in my younger days in battle. I do give him a slight tilting of the head and a nod, in which, for those who would know me, is respect.
He kind of looks at you like he doesn't recognize you, like he doesn't even remember that he knows you at all.
I take my position. I remain standing as well around this table, this great table with the map. I do graciously accept a glass or a horn of mead or whatever they have provided. I don't even acknowledge you, Conrad. Really, my eyes just pass sort of over you. I give a bow to both of the noblemen. Perhaps a slightly deeper bow to the Hammer, as he is our host. Baron, it is my honor to be at your disposal once more. You know, I myself and the Argent Bulwark always do our job with utmost discretion and with honor. There will be no breaches of friendship or displays of antagonism from myself in this place. Despite past dealings and old histories, we are here together as friends this night, this day. I intend to remain as such.
So that's directed at Baron Feidler, is that correct?
It's directed at Marcus Kreb, I think, who gave that pronouncement. Although I'm certainly talking mainly to both of them, if that makes sense.
Ernest Feidler is the one who's called you. It's his castle.
Oh, my apologies.
You've worked against him in the past. And then Marcel Kreb, yes, has come, but he's not really in charge. Although he's not in charge. It's not like, I mean, they're basically equals.
I follow you.
So that's
it is directed at Feisler, and a special,
right.
I kind of look confused. Like, I guess like I look at my two like commanders. Like, have I breached etiquette? I didn't realize I was supposed to introduce like myself like this. In our tradition, we eat first to ensure that no one is murdered right off the bat. I'm at the moment like grabbing for like this raw leg of lamb.
Have you like brought a leg of lamb? You're like, here you go.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Yeah, I reach down in my and bring out this lamb leg that I brought before.
So you can see perhaps everyone like tenses as if you're reaching for a weapon. Mm-hmm. And then you just pull out this leg of lamb.
I have brought this to you, great lords of the lion and the goat. This is to show the goodwill of my peoples. You may sup upon this as I will sup upon your food to ensure our goodwill in this time of great troubles for the lands. It is yours, and I give it presenting it to Feidler, the lion.
So he'll probably he'll step forward and just take it from you, as if he's just trying to get this over with. He's a very practical man, and he does look at you and just, we thank you for your gift, Hawk. And we thank you for your homage, General Heidenreich. But it is not an offer of service that I brought you here for, good General. It is an offer of opportunity. I have called you all here because we're all under threat by the goblins. When they come forth, they'll sweep away everything in their path. That includes your paying customers. That includes your tribes out on the plains. But if the four of us can come together, we can ride into the pass and destroy them there while they're bottlenecked. It's the only chance any of us have. And I've not come as a count or a king. I've come as someone who's in danger. A brother beside you. This day, I wish us to all be brothers.
Indeed, we are all brothers and sisters of this land. I can see that it is important. These goblins do not care for the lands. They take and they take and they take until there is nothing left. We will fight with you, of course, Lion Lord.
Yes. I too have heard of growing amassments of these goblin scum amongst the hills and the crags of the mountains to the south. Was not aware such numbers had gathered to constitute such an arrangement. I see things must truly be dire in this time. I can see you speak wise words, Lord of the Ram. This is right. Eyeing that savage who called him the goat.
Now again, the Feidlers, their sigil is the red lion, the blood-soaked lion atop the mountain of corpses. It's Marcel has the white ram from Icy Wind Pass. So he hasn't spoken as of yet. Has Marcel. But hearing this,
go ahead. Sorry.
But hearing Ernest's opening statement, he does speak up, and he says, "Such a plan is preposterous, Ernest. Even the barbarian," and he gestures towards Hawk, "will know better than to face them in the mountains. They're surely setting a trap. Our forces would be just as choked as theirs. Your castle may not be as great as my own, but we should all know that this is where we must make our stand, where we have fortifications, where we can prepare the terrain, where we have the will of the people to back us."
I briefly glance at Badger, who has very similar opinions. But of course, his opinion was to stay in the plains and to wait.
A network of tunnels.
Well, no, to await and to strike from our own homelands. That these lands are not fit for our peoples. But I of course take a more hawkish approach, if you care to forgive the pun. But I do not think that is wise, Goat Lord. I think we must truly, yes, we must wait for them to come out of the mountain pass when they have that higher ground. That is not a wise position to attack from. But neither should we burrow ourselves into the castle walls. They will simply surround us and kill us. We must strike with lightning fast precision and fade away and strike and fade. That is truly the lofty way of the hawk. That is the way that we will defeat a much larger host.
You can see Marcel and Ernest kind of lock eyes, and then they look at you, and they kind of look back at each other, as if they're both kind of realizing that they might not agree on anything except that you're wrong. And they kind of, without saying anything, you can see they kind of like look at each other as if, okay, we need to sort this guy out, like, because if he takes off, we're really fucked. So we need to convince him to stay, whatever happens. But they don't say anything immediately. What is General Heidenreich's opinion on this?
Well, your words, Baron Fedler, are true. The threat of the goblins is great. Too great to be ignored any further. But equally, so too does the hammer speak true to fight these savages in their warrens, their caves. Like, I don't even know what goblins make. I'm just assuming it's warrens and caves and other shit like that. Would be disastrous. As we both are men of war, men of combat, have seen bloodshed, have stood on the battlefield with our men countless times. We both know how this must be engaged. We must array ourselves in the outlying lands before the castle, before the mountain pass. Bring them to us, to open ground, where we will stand in strength and in force. And as they spill forth from the mountains like the vermin that they are, we will crush them, we will destroy them, as is the way of our kind over theirs. If the worst should happen, we can move back to the castle, though I am convinced with the combined strength of both your noble houses, such will not be a concern. I myself have brought scores of Fusiliers, pikemen, to hold any tide of their numbers. Hold them back, as my Fusiliers can pick many off before they're even within range of our swordsmen, our pikemen. It would be my honor to perform that role in the battle to come. If it is numbers that we face, the Argent Dawn has held back scores more in the past, which is totally not true, I'm sure. But
what is your sigil? Just ask curiosity, Hydric.
Oh, like what's on my
yeah,
my thing there?
Yeah.
So it is a sort of circular medallion upon which there is sort of it embossed like a buckler almost. Behind that is kind of like a starburst pattern, and upon the buckler itself is sort of a not like a ram's horn, but like a war horn almost. And there's like a kind of like a gust of air sort of coming off of that. You can see it's like a war horn upon a buckler.
This colorful man is wise. He is truly wise. To draw the enemy out like this, to bring them, it seems that your people are good at holding the line, as you say. That seems to be your strength. I think it is wise to meet them on open ground. Perhaps my chariots could draw them out, to lure them in. What say you, lords?
So Ernest has been kind of taking stock of everyone's opinion, but he chimes in again. Says, perhaps your tactics would work against normal foes, but these are no normal enemies. My scouts have ranged throughout the highlands and the mountains. We've seen them gathering and training in their warrens. Sure enough, their infantry are nothing too special. They have hardly any archers, but slingers, although their numbers are massive. But their cavalry, they ride giant bats through the sky. They have giant spiders upon the ground, and each one is driven by an archer with a fierce bow made of ibex horn. I'm afraid to face them from the castle wall. The spiders would come right over the top. I can only think that the bottleneck is the smartest thing. Between your pikes and my own, between our slingers, and he gestures to himself, the crossbowmen of the Krebs, and the musketeers of your own force, perhaps we could hold them and wear them down. You can see Marcel, the hammer, looks very taken aback at this word of giant spiders and giant bats of aerial cavalry. And he's kind of taking a minute to absorb this. He starts stroking his beard. What is your reaction, the Hawk and Heidenreich, hearing about this cavalry threat?
My eyes definitely widen with the mention of giant bats and giant spiders. It's a horrifying thing that I've never seen before, and to hear that these are I may have mistaken these goblins that I have never met before in my life, but I kind of quiet down to listen to people who obviously know more of these people than I do.
This news of this cavalry that you speak of, I had not counted upon this. What would you say is the terrain like upon the entrance to the mountain pass? Is it still flat enough to utilize these our numbers to effect? But these, I get kind of like these charioteers that are mentioned, be usable within the pass?
You see, Baron Feidler shakes his head as if the chariots will be of no use inside the pass itself.
What of simple cavalry? Will they too be hindered?
Yeah, you get the impression any kind of cavalry would be at a strong disadvantage, which is why he's hoping that the spiders will also be at a disadvantage.
To combat this foe, we should know what is at our own disposal. I have spoken of what I bring into this battle. Musketeers and pikemen are plenty. What other forces have we to use against these goblins? If we know what we have at our disposal, together we can come up with a strategy keen enough to overcome.
Yeah, with pride, I whoosh out my arms in a grand display to kind of announce what my force is. We have in our disposal, we have the great shamans of our tribe, few in number, but strong in heart and of body. We can change ourselves into the form of animals and fight with the ferocious nature of the wolf. or with the tenacious claws of the mountain cat, or even the great hawks of the peaks at our disposal. That is, we also have here, and I grandly sweep to show Badger, we have our ferocious warriors on foot, armed mostly with the spears and the axe and the shield to bring ferocious battle face to face with our enemy. And we have Elk's men, the strong, elite forces, the hardened warriors of each of our tribes, riding upon chariots drawn by great elks, trained for battle, to move in close to the enemy and toss in spear and javelin into their midst before riding away before the enemy can engage properly. That is what I bring to this council.
You can see everyone's a little bit iffy. Like, you talk a big talk, but they clearly don't trust, they just don't trust you to be competent because you're a barbarian in their eyes. But there's certainly some degree of hope that, well, maybe they can be useful. Of course, Ernest will certainly describe again that, you should remember my forces, as we've clashed before. But I'll say again, and he looks over at Hawk, that we command the finest pike squadrons. And he looks at Heidenreich as he says that. Backed up by infantry with great swords to snap the pikes of our foes and any who get underneath our spearheads. And following behind are the Highland slingers, most accurate with their rocks there. And Marcel will speak up and say, my force is small. We have the finest armor from the dwarfs and are armed with dwarf hammers as well as crossbowmen. And of course, you'll also recall, Heidenreich, that they both do have very small cavalry forces as well. The Feidlers, very light cavalry. The Krebs, very heavy cavalry. But both very, very small in numbers, either way.
Yeah, so I probably have the most amount of cavalry of the group, just because although there's only a third of my force is composed of chariots, there's so many of us that there are many chariots.
Yeah.
So.
Indeed, I do remember both your forces quite well. You both each fight with tenacity. It will be a great service to this, what is to come. It is unfortunate that what cavalry we possess must be so hindered as to be nigh unusable in what is to come. If we are to meet at the mountain pass, it is true with our pikes, I say, gesturing to the Baron, the hammers that you possess, we would greatly halt for a great long time any encroaching enemy into the open fields, to the open lands. If your mystics are as skilled as you say, I say, also kind of eyeing you up oh, perhaps they can call upon your mysticism to assuage the sum of the bat riders that will be coming down from the hills on top of our heads. But perhaps while our cavalry may not be useful once the battle truly commences, perhaps they can be used as a surprise attack. Go in to the goblin lands, cause as much devastation, death as they can, ride back, and will give them quite a cause to move swiftly against us without time to prepare themselves. Perhaps that might be the best usage of their talents. If we have need to fall back, then the cavalry can remain strong behind the lines and protect our retreating lines if it comes to that.
How tall is your character?
My character?
Yes.
Just under 6 feet.
You're brave, Songbird, but I do not think that will work. These spider riders, as they are called. I think that they will have a great advantage against my cavalry in such mountainous terrain. I think they will be very able to outrun and cut down my elk-drawn chariots, my reindeer, in that terrain. I think it is best that they are used in the mouth of this valley.
Marcel will nod in agreement to this, and he will say that the mouth of the pass, I agree, should be our line of battle. I do not either trust to walk into this canyon, this chasm, where the spider riders may flank us vertically. I believe we should set the Fiedler pikemen as well as those of the Heinrich, what's your gimmick's name?
The Argent Dawn.
Argent Dawn. I'm sorry.
Sorry, the Argent Bulwark. The Argent Dawn is something else from a video game.
Sorry, I'll write that down. Set the Fiedler pikemen as well as those of the Argent Bulwark at the mouth of the pass, and all of our archers parade behind them, followed by and he's about to say barbarian, but he catches himself, by the fierce warriors of the plains, held in reserve, that if our pikemen fail, they may plunge into the fray.
I glance at Badger, wondering, thinking I would have the discipline to wait. But will he? And I look at him with his fierce little eyes. Yes, I think that is wise. I think perhaps the chariots on the far flanks, ready to move in once combat is engaged. Of the elk can move in with swiftness around the sides and the back of the host, tossing javelins in. I think that is a good and wise, disciplined move coming. Yes, and like for a second, I think of like calling him like goat, or sheep, but perhaps that not wise.
Yes, your words have convinced me, Baron Kreb. The mouth of the mountain pass will give us the best combination of advantages for ourselves and disadvantages for our enemy. The goblins will still be compacted, exiting the mountain pass, while we will maintain the advantage of open terrain where we might use our forces at their full capacity. I would be my honor to arrange my pikemen upon the center line, along with your pikemen, Baron, to hold back with the greatest amount of force the brunt of the horde, while my Fusiliers, they will perhaps best be deployed, integrated with some of your forces to protect from these bat riders, protect your hammer wielders, your swordsmen, from what might attack us from the air. My Fusiliers will do all that they can to keep them safe.
I believe that this is where my shamans shall shine, especially the ones that take upon the aspect of the bird. They will fly above the battlefield upon our center, keeping us aided against these bat riders. Although, again, they are few in number, they are great in experience and wisdom.
Ernest might speak up again and say, well, it's fine, I suppose, that we've all come to some kind of agreement. I can find little flaw in your plan, but I must point out again, you've found a way to position yourself at the rear, expecting the fiddlers to put in at the front. And he just sneers at Marcel as if he's implying cowardice in the hammer. Marcel, you can see him like starting to turn red. He starts shaking. Does anyone do anything to stop him from yelling at Ernest?
So where was he? Where was actually this goat man? Where was he saying he was going to be positioning himself?
At the rear. And then Ernest is pointing that out. And,
so he's not riding. He's not riding with the cavalry. He's like making up like.
Well, yeah, but his
archers.
But what he described was these spearmen at the front, yep. and then the archers, yep. And then pretty much everybody else, which would include him. And Ernest is just pointing out, oh, well, you're going to be at the back, I see. Yeah, well, my pikemen and great swordsmen and slingers will all be at the front. I see how it is. You know.
So he has armor. What did he have at his disposal?
He does have crossbowmen. Ernest has or Marcel has crossbowmen at the front, but his heavy infantry and heavy cavalry, according to his plan, will be kept at the back in reserve if the pikemen suffer a breakthrough.
Oh.
Yeah, I'm actually agreeing with the lion on this one. Like, I shake my head and I say, "You will not join combat at the front? That is not the way. That is not the way of the ram."
Well, some of us can put tactics ahead of glory. Is not the victory what is important to our cause, and not merely trying to add additional titles and honors to our name? Do we not think of our children rather than ourselves? This has always been the problem of the Feidlers. And he gets up and he's like red in the face. He's shaking his finger. There's like slobber flying out of his mouth into his beard.
You will position yourself with the women and children in the rear? That is where the women and children shall dwell. You should not be back there. Fight on the front lines.
And with that, finding a scapegoat in this situation. Enough! You have spoken too far, plainsman. Your words, you must remember who you speak to. Barons of the Ram and of the Lion. Both of your houses. You will recall the battle. Your uncle. One of their uncles is here. Battle of the...
Ernest has two of his uncles here.
Battle at the Pass of the Cross. It's the northwest of here. It's 13, 14 years ago. You know well, I think, the established assortment of your swordsmen, Baron, combined with your heavy armor of fine craftsmanship, the finest in these southern lands, keep you and your men quite safe and quite able to land blow after blow upon the enemies which come before us. If the pikemen do not hold, if the line fails, we will not be able, I fear, to rely upon your heavily armored forces to re-establish the line. They are best arranged upon the front or just behind the pikemen. They will not be quick enough. You must, if it comes to it, rely upon your well-trained cavalry to protect our backs if we must fall back to the walls or elsewhere to continue the fight. They will be the only thing swift enough to harry our opponents. We must not hold back any strength. These are our lands. These are your lands. We must not let these vermin forget this. Arrange as much strength as we can in one fist, and we will together strike them down.
The songbird speaks true. Your forces, much like the turtle, cannot move fast, but must be positioned to fight the enemy directly. Much like the snapping turtle, it is ferocious but not fast. I agree with the songbird here.
And Ernest and Marcel seem to have calmed down a little bit. Cooler heads do seem to have prevailed as they both kind of nod. Say, if that is all, I will see you on the field. And Ernest kind of looks at the two of you and nods his head unless there's anything that you guys want to add to the strategy meeting.
I give my bows. I give one final look upon the map of the battlefield that is to come, and I do depart to make preparations.
Briefly before you leave, hold there. Like I seem to struggle for the word. Sir? I did not catch your name. I have called you Songbird. I do not mean to offend. Perhaps you are Peacock instead.
Like, my eyes widen, but then I remember you're a savage, undoubtedly illiterate plainsman. as I was announced, I am General Heinrich Voigt of the military company, the Argent Bulwark.
Yes, but what aspect do you take upon yourself? Are you you seem like perhaps a leader, someone who calls out like the songbird to the others to draw their
Of
people
course,
in.
I am a leader. That is what a general is. So I see that your people do not hold such illustrious titles amongst their number. Yes, I am a leader of men of battle. And I have seen many skirmishes, many combats, suffered victory and defeat in equal number. So this day, I say, looking, one last time back to the remaining noblemen, I am confident this engagement will be on the side of victory.
Indeed.
They're completely completely oblivious to what you're actually asking for culture. Like, what spirit animal do you call upon? Like, that doesn't even enter my mind. If it did, I would be so offended, as it might be me, to take up arms, that you would suggest such primitive behaviors.
A songbird, then. Thank you for your help, sir.
I give you like a weird look, his strange ways, and I return to my men to inform them of the preparations to be made.
As I return to the great host outside of the city walls to feast and to drink upon the battle to come.
So maybe we'll take a very brief intermission, and then we'll come back with the battle itself. Sound good?
Sounds good.
Okay, I'll see you guys in 5. probably just going to do like super ultra light mass combat rules.
All right, sounds good.
Yeah. Usually I'd actually like make the units up, but just for the digital interface, I think it's more trouble than it's worth for a one shot.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of fun in our Game of Thrones Warhammer campaign, keeping track of like all the armies and things, because we ran for like 50 sessions. So, you know, some of the armies got beat down over time, and other armies, you know, they might not have started out very well, but they never took big casualties. So over the course of time, you know, they actually became pretty useful, not by getting better, but because everybody else got worse.
Nice.
Yeah, it was very fun. Okay, so Baron Marcel of House Crab, the what's the word? The Warden. I think it is Warden. That's the correct word. The Warden of Icy Wind Pass. He had actually declined the invitation of Ernest to stay in the castle. So he has his own tents, his pavilions set out beyond the city walls with his knights. Most of his men are staying in the city. Some of them are billeted out in pavilions with him. But most of them that can afford it are in the taverns, the inns, they're wenching. However, there is a rumor in the morning. So you've all spent the night in Weilerberg, outside the gates, wherever you were. But Baron Kreb was outside the gates in his own pavilions. And there is a rumor that is spreading in the morning. And this rumor says that an enormous black shape, such as that of a black bat, dropped down into Marcel's encampment in the night. Some people believe that this may have been a goblin messenger, that Marcel may be collaborating with the goblin host. This rumor is running rampant through the other units, the other men in the city. Do you take any notice of that before setting out? Or do you guys want to describe how you begin your march towards Winter's Teeth Pass?
So, yeah, I don't really take much notice of that. I don't think my people much care for what this goat man does with his with himself. If he shall betray us, we shall meet him in kind. But we march out in a very similar way that we did before, except on this time the chariots are upon the flanks in great, not exactly, they wouldn't be organized enough to call columns, but certainly they ride along the side. The great host is arrayed, and I sit very close to the center of this host, still in a chariot, but I shall be commanding from the center in this great chariot of mine. And the women and children are still following us, of course, in the rear, still kind of almost spectating the battle from the rear. So whatever befalls us will befall all of our people.
Can you describe these chariots? Is it 4 elk abreast, or is it 2 and 2, or is it? And how large is it? Like 10 feet across, or only 5, or?
These are fairly small and light chariots, but there are many of them. So there are 2. So this is the traditional chariot with two reindeer that draw the front with the 2 wheels in the back, a 2-wheeled chariot with one person driving the chariot with the other person drawing javelins from this large basket upon the back. My chariot, however, is even larger. It's a 4-person chariot with 4 elk, or 4 reindeer rather, being drawn straight in a line rather than like it's not a coach style. It's more of a 4 elk in front. So it's a very large battle wagon that carries many warriors ready to leap into the fray.
All right. And what about yourself, General Heidenreich? Do you take any notice of these rumors, or do you just set off?
No, I can't fathom a nobleman of the Empire debasing himself by consorting with such verminkind. To what gain would that avail him? So no, myself and the Argent Bulwark move out. The wagons of supplies, of course, following in the rear, rows upon rows of both pikemen and fusiliers with pikes and muskets upon their shoulders, well trained, well used to movement and deployment, and have done this scores of times before. And I am, as we arrange ourselves to be deployed, if there is time, I will have some of my men sort of setting up, wooden posts, slanted wooden posts at strategic locations in collaboration with the other 2 barons to halt any charges of spider riders, other such cavalry or charging infantry, and just going about the business of preparations for battle, of which all of my men are quite experienced at.
All right.
What are you carrying yourself into battle, just out of curiosity?
So I do not have a mount. I do not have a chariot or anything that I that I have myself. I actually look fairly similar to how you saw me before, as I, of course, wore the my clothes. You could see beneath my doublet is a well, or perhaps you would imagine, well crafted coat of mail, which you could see sort of the sleeves of from hanging below the sleeve of my doublet. I have upon my shoulder a musket of my own, which is stained a deep dark nut color of well-worn wood. Upon the stock is engraved, sort of burned into the stock, is the same emblem that is upon my pin here, which you would now note all of my men have that same thing on their garmentry. It is go ahead, sorry.
Just as a clarification, David, muskets in this setting are very rare, aren't they?
Yes.
Okay, so as a small note, my character looks at you and your marching men very strangely. Like some of them, it looks like you're a line of porcupine, basically like the porcupine men. And then these other ones carrying these thick clubs, perhaps. I look at them kind of strangely.
Like reinforced clubs with iron.
Like a metal club. I find this interesting, but I sort of, those strange ways of foreign people, I suppose.
All right, and the Krebs and Feidlers marching out as well. The Feidlers, you can see, wearing fairly light armor, mostly Kier Bully, boiled leather, and gambesons. Some of them having mail. Of course, all of the cavalry, the knights, will have mail. But you see the rows of great swordsmen, the pikemen following, and then after them the Highland slingers bringing up the rear, and of course moving about, inspecting the ranks, shouting orders, are Ernest and his knights, wearing their mail, having their lances at the ready. They're pretty much some of the great swordsmen have mail as well, but for the most part it's a very lightly armored force. And then Marcel Kreb, of course, in marching, his men have their pole axes, or pole hammers, as they call them, which is very similar to a halberd with a warhammer head. Essentially a spear with a hammer on one end and a pick on the other and a spike on the very top. As well as the crossbowmen marching forward. The crossbowmen seem to have, almost all of them have mail armor, very heavily armored for archers, and they have gambesons, those who don't have mail. And his cavalry, of course, have mail even for traveling. But in battle, they've brought wagons and wagons full of plate for their infantry and their cavalry. So on the eve of the battle, they'll be donning that plate armor to bump them up to being very, very heavy infantry and cavalry. It's even said that Baron Marcel has commissioned a special suit of plate for his horse. Even his horse will have armor, which is virtually unheard of for the Feidlers, because I don't even think Ernest has plate for himself. But as you're arriving, Ernest will perhaps look at you, Heidenreich, and nod his head and say, "I appreciate a man who can lead his men from the front, stand amongst them, hear their screams, and look into their eyes. I'll be there with you, with my sword at your side."
And I give him like a kind of salute. So we have crossed paths before on opposite sides of the battle. I have only utmost respect. Seeing your leadership on the front lines is most impressive to me. I hope I meet with the same. It is my honor to fight at your side this day.
I will give a good show to those in the rear. And he looks back towards Marcel on his horse. He's no doubt planning to remain with the heavy cavalry in the very, very back of the battle.
I give him like a smirk, but I don't say anything besmirching of Marcel, but I do kind of like.
And I take it that the Hawk is planning on sticking with his cavalry. That's correct?
No, actually, I am sticking in the middle at the moment, of course, ready to ride, to fly off, so to speak, towards whatever side I see needs encouragement. But at the moment, I'm in the center with the big mob of men of the Badger. Well, actually, I'm going to change that a little bit. So on one side, we're going to have the elk. So on the left is the elk and half of the charioteers. On the other half is me on the right-hand side. with commanding the right-hand charioteers. We'll do it that way. I think that makes more sense.
And I have divided. I've divided up my Fusiliers. What numbers I do have are proportionately, as best I can, divided up to have one or more, depending, kind of width integrated into the different sort of battalions, the different groupings there to, as I said, try and protect them from whatever bat riders. Probably not with the archers because they're archers. But
all right. So yes, you arrive at the mouth to Winter's Teeth Pass. Now this foreboding, it is very much like a canyon. These two cliffs coming up, and you can see the path winding forward through the crags of the mountain valleys. So you would set up your encampment quite some distance away, but have scouts go out and just be waiting. We know this is their route. It's the only way they can come with their force of arms. And indeed, the signal eventually comes through from the scouts, the advanced scouts. The goblin horde has been spotted. They're moving through the pass. The men spring into action, donning their heaviest possible armor, saying prayers to their gods, to Sigmar, to Ulrich, to Myrmidia, whoever their chief god or goddess is, and arraying themselves there at the mouth of the pass in waiting. First the great swordsmen of the Fidlers, then the mixed pike of the Fidlers, and the Argent Bulwark, then the mixed archery, the slingers, the crossbowmen, the fusiliers. Following that, Andrew, is there any particular order your men are arrayed in, or they're just this horde?
No, there is definitely an order. So at the front, we have light skirmishers, who are basically javelin throwers, with small shields and small bronze swords. Behind, so they're like a light screen in the front, and then behind them are basically the light, or basically the light infantry. That's what the rest of the majority are that infantry with the medium shields, wooden shields, combined with either axe or spear. And they're more like the skirmishers are definitely spread out. The infantry themselves are more like a shield wall, closer to an actual fighting force.
And then you've got your chariots, correct?
Yep, the chariots on the right, commanded by myself in my large wagon, and on the left, of course, the forces of the elk. Before we come into battle, of course, there is the screaming of the hawk that can be heard coming from me as I hype myself up for battle, encouraging my men. This just especially when the enemy can be seen, that's when the screech emanates from my voice. Again, perhaps the forces arrayed on the right, who are this organized, men of the Fidlers and others, perhaps look over, distracted perhaps for a second, this loud screech. But it's almost like, the sounds coming from my army are almost like the sounds of animals. There's growling and screeching and whooping.
All right, and then we'd have the heavy infantry of the Krebs divided into blocks, and behind them the heavy cavalry, the knights of the Krebs and the Feidlers, so that they can use those blocks as cover when they're moving back if they need to. Where would your Amber Mages be, the Druids and Shamans?
I was thinking that they are more towards the rear, ready to kind of take on any role that they need to. Again, once they change into animal form, they can be quite fast, so they can move with that is kind of their place, ready to take on whatever versatile role they need to.
All right. So as you're waiting there, your scouts have come out. They've given their report. The enemy is approaching. Everyone's getting their battle line in order, and then you're waiting. At the very front, there's Ernest, and yourself not far behind him, Heidenreich, and you can hear the men straining, listening, waiting. You can hear perhaps an eagle cry out and echo through that canyon. A stone dislodged and falls. And then you start to hear it, this chittering, this clicking, this scrambling sound of hundreds of giant spiders making their way forward, echoing through this canyon. So you can hear your enemy now advancing upon you. So how do you address the men? As they can hear this as well. The fear is coming over them. They're turning pale. What do you say to your men here on the eve of this battle?
Here they come, men. We knew this is what they would array against us. Hold the line as you have so many times before. Follow my orders. You will come out of this the victor. You have battle hardened. And I know none of you are cowards. None of you are men of weak hearts. Remember this strength. And when we have crushed the last of these disgusting vermin, all throughout Wissenland will know the name of you and the name of the Argent Bulwark. And you will truly be a force of respect, a force, a people whose names and deeds will be sung and told about years to come. Hold that in your hearts and know that this is no place for such scum. Show them the mercy of your pikes and your muskets.
All right. Do the Argent Bulwark have a battle cry?
So many of them, my field commanders, they all have one of the a sort of representation of that war horn that is on our sigil, which I of course have as well. I blow first, and then my field commanders take up the call, and it's just sort of a cheer from the lower ranks in sort of echoing that clarion call of battle. So the first horn goes off, and then like a surge in response, many more horns from all across the lines, from the fusiliers, from the field commanders, amongst the pikemen, and then behind that, an uproarious cry, a cheer of many battle-hardened men who are not shaken by the encroaching rapidity of enemy battle lines.
All right. Make a fellowship test. We're actually going to roll some dice. So just
Oh
hit
my
your just hit your percentile. Compare that to whatever your fellowship is. And if you're actually, well, it's the same as Rogue Trader, really.
Oh no! Well, then that
So-
is not good at all. With a 98 there.
Good Lord.
That is I don't even have to look at that. I know I don't have a 98
All right,
higher.
excellent.
Fellowship. So
And do we want to come back to the Hawk? How do you inspire your men here on the eve of battle?
Peoples of the tribes, today we fight the spider and goblin host you see before you. Do not be afraid. Be brave in battle. Take upon the aspect of your spirit animal, and know that if you are brave and you are cunning, you will be reborn into the body of your animal that you were truly meant to be. You will be strong like the bear, or cunning like the fox, or swift and striking like the hawk. Be
But
upon them, men.
I'd imagine each of your people will cry out their totem as their battle cry. You'd have one yelling out, "A fox!" and another, the wolf! And they'd all be crying out their totem animals in this terrifying cacophony.
Yeah. Followed by, of course, the sound of whatever their animal may make.
Sure, absolutely. You may just be able to catch Heidenreich from where you are, Ernest, trying to motivate his men. Telling them that there is good and there is evil in the world, men, and we must stand between all that is good and all that is ill. We are the wall and the bulwark. We are the mountain between the plains and the wasteland. Let us shore up that mountain high, boys. A mountain of corpses. And they all cry out, "A mountain of corpses," as is their battle cry. And of course, you can probably hear not the speech of Marcel. He's a bit too far away from you. But you can certainly hear his men calling out behind you. The cold, the wind, the ram, as is their battle cry.
Yeah, that one with hearing the corpses is like, oh God, like their spirit animal are corpses. That's horrifying. But at least the ram one makes sense to me. So.
All right. Let me just adjust these gentlemen based on how motivating they are.
Did you want me to roll as well?
Oh yes, I'm sorry. Please roll as well.
It's not going to be great because it's not my kind of.
Give it a shot.
We'll see how that goes.
Using the super simplified mass combat system.
Yeah, that's a fail for me.
Let me just get yours pulled up here.
Because I had to roll under my ability. So that's a 30, so I got a 65. So nope.
Yep. Sorry, I'm just adjusting my sheet here. I just noticed I made an error.
I do have luck. I'm not sure what that does in second edition Warhammer.
I believe it allows you to reroll.
I'll wait to reroll on that one.
Okay. So yes, as you're waiting, you hear the chittering in the distance. You can start to hear the screaming of the goblin hordes, perhaps the flapping of bat wings. Make perception tests. And failing that, if you don't have perception, I believe it's intelligence. I believe.
Ooh. Well, I think it's going to succeed whatever it is, a 0-2.
All right, excellent. And yourself, Heidenreich? Heidenreich?
Sorry, that will be a fail.
Okay. So you would certainly notice the hawk, using the eyes of the hawk, that as you can look forward, you can start to see this moving mass of chitin or chitin, depending on your pronunciation, just rolling forward. These spiders and the schiltrons of pikemen drop down their lines, creating this huge forest of spears towards it. But you notice, peering up over the edge of the cliff at the very top, you notice black forms moving into view. You believe that there are spiders perched on top of the canyon walls, overlooking the cliff and the battle and your forces, just as their fellows are rushing up through the cleft itself. Do you give any warning of this?
Yeah, certainly. Like I will ride my chariot close to the men of near the center, of course, shouting out to pass along the line. Look carefully upon the cliff face. There are more waiting. I do not know their intention, but if they seek to flank us, I will meet them.
All right, so you've heard this coming through the lines now, Heidenreich. You can see them. It would be a very difficult shot, but do you order your men to open fire on the cliff face, or do you wait and concentrate on what's coming up the canyon?
Were they infantry or spiders?
It looks like they're spiders moving around up there. There's these large, it's hard to see over the edge of the cliff, but they appear to be too large and bulky to be people.
Is there time enough for a shot and a reload before the horde gets here? For a volley to be... if there is, then why not?
There probably will be, yes.
All right, then absolutely.
All right. Make a shooting test, a ballistic skill test in lieu of your men.
Come on. There we go. That will be a success.
Excellent.
Ballistic skill, you said, right?
Yes, sir.
Most definitely. Fusiliers! Train your eyes! Like I hold my hand out. I give them like a couple seconds. Fire! And I command them all to open a volley upon that place where the scuttling swine doth hide.
All right. So there's just tremendous boom as the muskets go off. And then shortly later, screams from up above. Of course, some rocks fall, nothing terribly dangerous at this point. And perhaps even a few goblins or maybe one spider, the size of a horse, comes falling down as it's been shot through the head. And you can see all those silhouettes scuttle back away from the cliff face. Now let me ask though, Hawk, what's your reaction to this huge boom as the muskets are fired for the first time?
So are your men like spread along a line, or are they more like center?
So a lot of the men are centered along the line with the contingents. But there's also a large mat because in the middle, because there's a lot of people in the middle, there's a large contingent of us in sort of the center where the main sort of volley exudes from.
Okay, so this large boom, like they're like thunder, like lightning coming from the sky, and like I look over at like this flash that like momentarily kind of blinds me, and there's like almost a bit of mass confusion from certainly the elk riders. The elks like certainly like rear up and scream. Men are milling about in confusion and terror, holding their eyes. And I certainly like look about in confusion, scared, like perhaps lightning is coming down right in our midst. And I look and I see it came from those clubs, the sorcery, magicians of some sort. I definitely like look at you with a certain amount of fear in my eyes, certainly.
All right. Do you want to make a fellowship test to see if you can calm your men down a bit?
Sure. I actually do make that.
Excellent.
Fear not, men. We have sorcerers in our midst with magical items. They are on our side.
All right. So yes, the first volley goes off. Your men begin reloading. The spider riders are now coming into view. You know, it's his most hideous sight and aspect. You can see these huge black and brown spiders scuttling and leaping and crawling at high speed, not only along the floor but along the walls. They seem to be crawling over each other at times. And mounted on each one of them is one of these green-skinned goblins with glowing red eyes to match their mounts. Now these goblins appear to have bows in hand, and as they're coming forward, you know, they're drawing up these bows. They fire a volley into the front line just as their spiders are reaching that level. And at this time as well, there's a scraping sound and a twanging from above. You can see the spider riders and goblins up there are pushing down boulders, and they're firing with their own bows again down into the front line as well. So the initial infantry is certainly taking a pounding here. So then we'll come back to the hawk. If we'll stay in some semblance of initiative, I suppose. Do you take any action at this point?
So are you saying that the main body of their host has hit the front line at this point?
They've come forward. They've fired a volley of arrows. And as they've done this, the ones up on the cliff have rolled down some boulders and firing their own arrows into the pikemen. But they are not quite within, they haven't impacted the pikemen yet. Pikemen will essentially be getting like a reaction to do their attack first.
Okay. We will we will wait. We will hold action.
All right. So then we'll come back to you, General Heidenreich. The spiders are coming in. Your pikemen and musketeers have their chance. What do? Do you order them? The pikemen is probably pretty obvious.
The pikemen are holding. They're doing their job is obvious.
Yeah, but do you order the musketeers again up on the cliff or straight ahead? Your musketeers are probably the only ones with the range to reach the top of the cliff. The crossbowmen might not be able to make it.
I'm going to order the Fusiliers to attack the archers and the boulder throwers from the cliffs, as no other force has any recourse against them.
All right.
So I will. I'll make that attempt.
So make weapon skill for your pikemen and ballistic skill for your musketeers.
Okay. Success on the musketeers, a failure on the weapon skill for the pikemen.
All right. So again, your sharpshooters very effective. See more goblins raining down, perhaps a few more spiders, as now they're closer to the edge, using their legs to push these boulders over. Your pikemen, however, it seems have been disrupted by the archers, by the rebel raining down on them. So perhaps they lift just a little too high over the head of the charging forces. The Feidlers, however, do manage to hold strong against that cavalry. And as they're taking their hit, their great swordsmen will stride forward, cleaving up under the pikemen into the bellies of the spiders. Ernest Feidler leading the charge, screaming, "A mountain of corpses!" as he swings and cuts the head of a spider in half horizontally, and the whole beast just falls down. He starts climbing up and he goozles the goblin on top of it and just takes his sword and stabs him with the crossguard right in the eyeball. So the swordsmen are in fact in danger of getting ahead of the pikemen and leaving their cover. And in fact, they do. They leave their cover because they're fucking berserkers. So they're now significantly more exposed than they really should be. I'll get their slingers and the crossbowmen for the Krebs as well. Most excellent work on the half of both of those groups. And then I believe we'll come back. to the goblins at that point. So we'll get the actual spiders coming in, doing tremendous damage to the swordsmen as they're no longer protected by the pikemen. So they're really focusing on the Feidlers at this point, although their archers will fire into your pikemen with good success, especially since they're already somewhat disrupted there. And you can see now, looking back through the ranks, you can see that the goblin infantry is approaching behind their cavalry. They appear most heavily armored. Most of them seem to have mail shirts of some kind of black iron and spiked shields, and they have some kind of short sword attached to a gauntlet, like a pata blade. But they're coming forward with that. And of course, the first thing you think of is, they're obviously equipped for like tunnel fighting. They have these short stabbing swords and these shields that are fairly vertical in outline, but certainly a heavily armored force. And I believe we'll come back to yourself, Andrew.
All right. So at this point, seeing the swordsman in trouble, we swift like the wind, men, forward! And we the elk and the reindeer start galloping forward, and we're just gonna sweep right around the edges of the line. So hopefully, of course, elk on the end sees this, but we shall see if he does. But certainly, the right side will sweep forward, right along, getting very, very close to the spider riders, and perhaps even getting close to the infantry, and just throwing javelins straight into their midst, above their shields, and right upon their heads.
All right. So I want you to make 3 tests. Make a fellowship test for your own men to not disrupt the pikemen with the fucking elk horns.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to make one to command the man named Elk to do his duty on the other side.
Okay.
And then get your ballistic skill for your actual attack.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, first one. Okay, so this is for disrupting. Yeah, so I'm going to let that one slide. So that's disrupting the pikemen. We do disrupt the pikemen, indeed. Okay, second one. Ooh, man, that's a really bad failure. That's for commanding Elk on the other side.
What do you think he does do? Is he just kind of out of position, or did he ignore your order altogether?
We're gonna say that like he starts way too late. He doesn't seem like this happen at all, and perhaps even as we're going out, he still is sitting there. Waiting.
Right.
And then the last one was ballistic skill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And that is, let me see what my ballistic skill is. Oh, seriously? Come on. Man, he has a terrible ballistic skill. I guess this will be the one I re-roll then.
Okay.
Nope.
No hits.
No hits, apparently.
All right. So then I think we'll come back to you, Heidenreich. Can you make a fellowship test? Because your pikemen are severely disrupted at this point. So make a fellowship test to get them back into line.
My fellowship is not good. That is not a success, but nevertheless, you know, I still hold the line, protect the swordsman. But then the elkmen, the elk riders sort of come in, and it's this big cacophony that's happening, and I see from where I am the infantry. They're coming forward. I almost give an order to attack, to maybe command the Fusiliers to ease up what's happening in the center. But there's so much going on. I can't be sure any of my men will not kill any of our forces. So fire on the ridge. Fire death upon them until they tumble from the cliff, and there is naught but bones and blood. As my Fusiliers attempt to fire again on the archers and the boulder throwers on the ridge, unable to lend any support upon the pikemen at this point.
All right. So roll a ballistic skill. You can still issue orders to your pikemen. It's just they'll be less effective.
Well, I mean, I would have tried to. Again, that my roll did not succeed, but I
was basically giving you that like as a reaction, but you can still take your actual action.
Sorry. No, okay. In that case.
And it could just be to rally them, or you could order them forward, even though they're disrupted. They're still in the fight. They're just not a tight unit. So when they're disrupted, they're kind of more risk of breaking and running, basically. So you could attack. You could get them back in formation. Those are the obvious ones to me. You could try to retreat or whatever you want.
Yeah, retreat. It's all over. Back into formation. The infantry comes. Hold the line. I just keep issuing that over and over again. I'm trying to command them to get back, to hold that fortification, to get back, back in line.
Roll it.
Jeez. And I'm going to re-roll that one.
Okay.
So use the power of luck.
That's
to make myself slightly more lucky, but not lucky enough to get a 30 or under.
Welcome to Warhammer, by the way,
yeah.
where you just fail every test.
So I'm trying to to establish some order against the tide of discordancy that is happening all around us, but to little avail.
Okay, well, we'll get your ranged support here, one of which is very effective, and they're probably, again, focusing right in on that spider cavalry. And then I believe the Feidlers are the other useful force out front. So they're probably going to push right through the cavalry, and they're now coming in face to face with the goblin infantry. So they're basically like almost surrounded now because they've pushed through. They've broken through the line of the enemy into the main horde, but if those spiders turn around, they'll be surrounded. And then I believe we are back to the goblins. Unless the crabs probably won't do anything yet. So the goblins, infantry versus infantry. Let's see how they can fare. So they're actually doing pretty good against the Feidler swordsmen. Now they're spider cavalry, so they've got the Feidler pikemen are still in formation, holding them. They've got a force behind them. So they are probably going to turn and surround the Feidler swordsmen and start setting upon them from behind. And then we'll get the goblin archers, such as they are. And they're probably going to come in against your Fusiliers. So they're really very upset at the sharpshooters of your company. They're really focusing their arrows from the cliff top and trying to get some boulders down into you guys. I think the elk, you're largely not being targeted at the moment. But as this is all going on, you all hear a rush of air, and looking up above you, you see these black wings, these shadows flying through and out of the canyon over your forces, and leaning over the edge of the necks of the brawny shoulders of these great black bats. You can see that each one has a goblin mounted upon it with one of those composite bows, the bow made of the horns of the ibex. And they begin firing arrows down into the ranks, and they seem to be trying to disrupt the rear ranks. So they're coming into to our good barbarians, as they look very disruptible. But they don't actually inflict anything very serious at that point. And then we'll come back to you, our good barbarian.
Okay, good barbarian is seeing a desperate situation for the swordsman at this point. So we're going to continue our charge along. We're sweeping like water over a boulder. We're just sweeping around to the rear of the infantry, basically, and hope to get some advantage from being in their rear. And throwing javelins in upon them. At this point, I'm really hoping, so probably at this point, the elk probably sees what's going on and probably starts to set in on the cavalry, sweeping around on his side. If the bat riders get close enough, the skirmishers will definitely throw a javelin.
Okay, I'd say they're in range. So it sounds like a ballistic test to push through the spider riders. Yep. Or excuse me, that's a weapon test. Yep. Or ride. I'd allow ride if you have it, which would be agility. Actually, I think it would be like agility plus 10 if you're just trying to move. If you're trying to fight your way there, I'll get weapon at flat value.
We're basically gonna bowl our way through the riders to sweep around the back.
Okay. Get ballistic for your javelin throwers. That's all you said. You and command against the elk to
Yep.
see if he can figure out what he's doing.
Okay. So the first one, the weapon skill, succeeds. So out comes the big sword, the long, great sword, and we're just going along the line. I hit one of these goblin riders like straight across the chest, and he nearly falls in half. But he keeps he flops around in his saddle as the spider just gets trampled by the elk riders, but he's flopping around, almost severed in half, but not severed at the spine. So the second test was command, right?
Yeah, for the elk. See if he's coming to help you or not.
That one I will allow that one to fail as well.
Okay.
And
you can see Ernest, his men have drawn up in this ring, and there's not many of them left, but they're completely surrounded on one side by these infantry with the shields and the stabbing daggers, and on the other side the spiders just biting with the mandibles and being shot from the riders.
Right, and so the last one is us. We've barreled through, I assume, the riders, and we're now coming along the sides and rear of the infantry, and we're just going to chuck javelins into those infantry to try to save these brave swordsmen.
All right.
And I'm re-rolling that, and that one is a success.
And is that the javelin against the bat riders, though? Correct?
No. Oh, I'm sorry. So, javelin against the bat rider. Sorry, we just made it through the riders, so we can't.
Okay. Yeah, and then in the rear, the skirmishers that are not mounted, they're the ones who are, they're throwing those javelins up, and one of the bats is just pincushioned and just starts spinning. You can hear the goblin riding it just scream, "Ah!" as it's spinning. He just plows into the ground at high speed.
Where he's set upon, there's this large roar comes out from the badger as he leaps upon the goblin that lays kind of broken upon the ground, and he severs the head off and raises it above to show to the host who roar in approval.
All right, and then I think we're back to Nick.
Pikemen forward! Protect the swordsman! As I try to order the men to move forward, to just catch up to the swordsman, to give some resistance against the pincer that they're in, to maybe pincer the spider cavalry now.
All right.
And as the shrieks and the cries of the bats are swirling overhead, as the twangs of arrows, all my fusiliers, you could see the noses of muskets reaching towards the heavens as each of them trains upon bats that are nearby their respective units, and they will attempt to fire upon them.
All right. So ballistic for the musketeers and weapon skill for the pikemen. So
we'll do ballistics first, weapons second.
Sure.
Those pikemen, the ballistics, excellent work on the part of the fusiliers. Less so on the pikemen. They are just not used to dealing with the non-chivalric tactics of goblin foes.
All right. So let's see here. The Fiedler light cavalry, which is way in the rear, can see way in the front Ernest is in trouble. They've started charging forward, trying to get to him, to rescue him. Both of his uncles are in that force. Actually, I think just Isaac is in that force. His other uncle is probably with him. Maybe dead. Anton, the cave bear, maybe dead. We'll see. But Isaac is now charging forward. So as he's charging through, he actually comes right through his own slingers and disrupts them unintentionally. He doesn't kill them, but they're disrupted from actually being able to fight this turn. His pikemen, however, do manage to press forward alongside your own, although perhaps a little bit more effectively. And as they're coming in between yourselves, your own pikemen, that is, who are doing some damage, the elk, the useful pikemen, but the spiders who remain in the front line, and there's not many of them at this point, break. They start trying to climb up the walls, climb over their own infantry to get away. So whatever was left of the spiders on the ground has broken. And, they're climbing up, and they're easy targets at that point to get picked off. And I believe we are back through to their turn. So we've got the Bat Riders inflicting some casualties onto the probably onto the barbarians. They really don't seem to like the barbarians very much. Let me just grab my sheet here and keep track of this. A hawk. Their infantry is coming forward. So I'll give you the choice, Andrew. Do you want to try to press your elk between the Baron Fiedler and the enemy infantry, or are you going to let him keep taking these hits?
Seeing that my
there's not many of them, right? And you've got his back, and the spiders are gone, but now the infantry's pressing down on his front. His front's very weak. So do you want to charge through and try to save him, or are you just gonna kind of that's his fault for being an idiot?
No, like that for me, that's a sign of bravery and fierceness. So like we're just gonna ride right between them, and at this point we're just gonna charge right in. We're gonna stop with the javelins and just break right into their ranks and spear them and hit them with swords. At this point, so we'll do that. We'll see if we can get elk to do anything. And I don't think there's really any space for the barbarians to charge forward yet, but they're probably going to still attack the Bat Riders. So we'll do 3 different tests then. Weapon skill, ballistic skill, and then command. So.
Okay. I'll also mention the Kreb crossbowmen have been disrupted.
Oh my god. Okay, so I'm going to roll. So the weapon skill is successful again. So apparently I'm really good. It's everyone else that sucks.
That's right.
But I will roll the command one more time to see if... Nope, definitely not. God, he's either a coward or a fucking idiot. I can't decide.
He's named a badger. He's probably an idiot.
No, this is elk. Elk is still not moved.
Sorry. Okay. I think the reroll is only once per day by the book. Actually, I got it. Oh, Nick, by the way, I looked up sharpshooter, and sharpshooter says you can, when you use the aim action, your next range attack gains plus 20 instead of plus 10. So you're very good at aiming. We haven't been using lesser actions so far, though. And luck is...
An extra one a day.
It's an extra fortune point is what luck is.
Yeah. I think
but we're not using fortune points, so it only gives you 1 total instead of 0 total.
Oh, okay. All right. Never mind then. Sorry. I wouldn't have been able to reroll anyway. So.
Okay. So I believe... Now, what are your shamans doing? Have we forgotten the shamans?
I think we have forgotten the shamans. The shamans are probably going to engage the Bat Riders at this point.
What form are they taking?
So they take the form of great eagles, of course, and streak forward like golden lightning through the sky to hit them and tumble down perhaps to the ground with them.
All right, make weapon skill for them.
Why is that not loading? Oh, that's 69. Is that under my weapon skill?
Yeah, I'm just getting you guys to use your stats.
That's a fail then.
Okay. And then I think we're through to General Heidenreich.
Pikemen, form up. Move onto the flank of the infantry. And let's hear the shrill call of the eagles clashing with the bats. Fusiliers! Go ahead.
Sorry, there was one thing I missed. So, so I had that successful weapon skill test. So we ride, again, like this river coming through them. And I look at, sorry, what's his name again? I call him, Lion, we have your back! Ah! We come charging in, of course.
All right. So I'm going to see if they can make a successful shield wall against you. And they do. They've got a successful shield wall. You're still inflicting damage. It'll just take some extra power to break their ranks if that's what you're trying to do. But yes, Heidenreich, it is you. So I'm thinking if you miss the bats, you hit the eagles.
Well, seeing that the eagles are engaging with the bats now,
yeah.
I'm going to have the Fusiliers support the pikemen as they reform to hopefully move to flank some of the infantry, as now like the barbarians and what's left of the swordsmen and the Baron's forces, the cavalry having been routed. Mm-hmm. So we're going to try and move in on the side of the infantry.
All right.
We'll see.
So are you basically using them as sharpshooters though? To support the infantry?
Yeah,
like
they're sort
firing,
of covering fire to move forward.
All right, so make ballistic skill to see how successful they are in that.
Not successful.
Okay. And what are your pikemen doing?
They're trying to reform and to move up. The line is sort of move forward now that the cavalry have been routed. They're trying to move up and reform the line.
All right, make a command test to reform.
That is successful.
Excellent.
Okay, and then should they roll weapon skill, or is that?
Well, I'm thinking either you can give them one command per turn. So either they attack or they reform.
Okay, got it.
Basically, reforming. I'm using very simplified rules, and I'm basically giving them an extra hit point when they reform.
Okay. Yes, that's what happened.
Which they really needed because they were down to 1 hit point.
They do. They were not doing well, but yeah, they reform and they move up at last.
All right. So now we've got the pikemen, and we've got the elk, the swordsmen, but then we've got a shield wall of goblins, and the shield wall will start to move forward quite successfully against your elk there, Heidenreich. So you're being pushed back. They have spiked shields. They have spiked gauntlets with big fucking knives or short swords attached to the end of the gauntlet, like a katar or a pata type sword. The bat riders are going after your eagles, not with much success. But at this point, there's also this torrent of metal balls that come down upon you. And looking back behind the infantry, you can see these goblins scrambling around on the rock faces with slings, hurling iron balls, iron shot over the heads of their shield wall and into your lines. And then I think our NPCs are up. So we've got the Fiddlers, The swordsmen fall back. The slingers actually reform. They see the other slingers, and they start slinging back. So we've got the battle of the slingers going on there. And the Feidler cavalry arrives on the front as well. And it's probably at this point that actually, if the barbarians haven't fully charged, the Krebs aren't going to charge either. They still have crossbowmen in the fight. So their crossbowmen are going to kind of follow the lead of those Feidlers and fire into the slingers. And then we're back to the. Are we back to the goblins next? Or no. We're back to you, aren't we, Andrew?
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
the goblins just went.
We'll see if the barbarians, I think at this point, seeing that the elk riders are not moving, are probably going to circle around the left. They're getting bored, and a badger, I'm sure, is not wanting to stay there. But I can make a command test for that if you like.
Well, Andrew, you've only got 15 minutes remaining. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. Do we want to narrate through the rest of the battle? Because that'll probably take close to 15 anyway.
Okay, sure. We can do it that way.
I sure like rolling through, but if we lose you, I don't see the point. Does that make sense, Nick? Does that sound okay?
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay. So the state of the battle right now is that General Heidenreich has reformed his pikemen. His musketeers are virtually untouched. The Krebs have done virtually nothing except have their crossbowmen forward. Ernest has got the shit kicked out of his swordsmen, and his slingers and pikemen are mostly intact. The Great Chief has lost quite a bit of his elk and some of his infantry as well, I believe. But he's certainly not in bad shape. The goblins, meanwhile, have lost all their spider riders and about 30% of their infantry and 20% of their slingers. So how do you guys think the battle will resolve at that point? What do you think, Andrew?
I think that so at this point, the barbarians charge forward, filling the cracks that are showing in the pike line, charging forward, taking heavy losses, but again inflicting probably some heavy losses of their own upon the enemy. The elk riders on the other side eventually get a clue, probably near the tail end of things. But basically, I think that my character, of course, moving in to support the lion, is hit. His chariot is broken. He is stabbed upon the ground. He survives, but he's very badly wounded, along with probably Feidler probably also gets very badly wounded. I'm sure an uncle or two of his dying in the process. At least probably he's one of very few swordsmen to survive. And I'm one of the few elk riders on the right flank to survive. But the elk riders, but I think the battle eventually does prevail. The left hand under elk eventually get a clue and give pursuit to the goblins that flee.
Yeah, so I'm thinking they've got their shield wall, but the furious elk riders with this weight, this massive elk that refuse to be held back, they pile their dead up and they charge through until finally the shield wall breaks. As soon as the goblins see their shield wall break, they panic. They turn and run. The Bat Riders see this. They see their support behind them is gone. They turn, start flying up the canyon, right into the sights of the Fusiliers. The Eagles hang back, and the Fusiliers just decimate the goblin bat riders. The ranks of the goblin chivalry destroyed. So what do you guys, do you have anything to add to that, Nick?
So I think, as is the continual omnipresent command of their general, pikemen of the Argent Bulwark do indeed hold the line, but take absolutely heavy losses doing so. Possibly on the verge of being routed. So heavily was the disruption early on in the battle. But as the Elk Riders finally move forward and they lend their own charge against the tide of the infantry, the Fusiliers move up, firing several volleys, just mowing down in a line, adding corpses to that pile, that hill.
The mountain of corpses.
A mountain of corpses that is being walked over by the slow tide of the Baron's
Retainers.
pikemen.
Yeah.
As then the lines break and the Bat Riders move in, and all the Fusiliers, their muskets to the heavens, that gleaming iron glistening in the sunlight, fires forth a final volley of thunderous death, spearing rider and bat alike, tearing holes and tears into the leathery, membranous wings, firing through the skulls of these bats, causing them to careen and crack and crash into the ground. The Fusiliers remaining for most of the battle relatively untouched, but the pikemen not so much.
All right, and I'm thinking the Krebs would charge at the last minute, and ever after the Baron would claim the battle was almost lost, but when my heavy cavalry took the field, they turned their tails and ran. So he's basically trying to take credit for the victory in the battle. And of course, Ernest, ever after, would say, the Krebs had been bought out by the goblins. It was only a matter of time before their betrayal. They were waiting to slit our throats and stab us in the back. But so great was our victory, even they had to switch sides like the turncoats that they are. And the enmity would continue for perhaps another 100 years between these great houses. What do you think is the long-term fate of the Argent Bulwark and the people of the plains?
How old is your character, Nick?
My character is definitely past his prime, not into old age, but possibly, somewhere in his early 40s, perhaps. But the stress of battle having made hair whiter before his years.
So we are certainly of the same age. I would leave. I would definitely leave the battle very scarred, but perhaps even more wiser to the reality of the real world. I would show great respect to you and your fighting, and your fighting style and your technology, even though I do not approve of it. I can see its usefulness in keeping back the goblin hordes from our lands. So I return to live out a long life in the lands of our people. But later, my son, who takes control of the tribes, the Confederation of Tribes on the Plains, are brought low by your son, who takes command of your legion and eventually is hired by the Feidlers to finally to bring the savage people of the plains to heel, and succeeds in doing so. So although I was successful upon this day, it was only a matter of time before the technologically backwards barbarians are brought low.
And as for the Argent Bulwark, so heavily was the main force of the company devastated that it took a very long time, and in fact, myself, Heinrich, did not live to see the mercenary company that he created actually come to any great sense of renown or recognition. Certainly, the vile Krebs would not have.
I'm almost thinking that the Krebs would offer you a lordship under them, because they're so impressed with you. They want you to fight for them all the time. But if you tell the Feidlers, they'll probably offer you an even greater lordship.
I mean, I absolutely am more impressed by Baron Feidler, and not at all. Despite the fact that we first met as foes on the battlefield, today we stood as allies on the front, standing together as both our forces were heavily diminished, and the thought of being in the employ of the Krebs family leaves a sour taste in my mouth. So if Feisler would offer me a lordship, then absolutely I would take it, and I would be actually, for once in my life, a loyal man. I'm always loyal to a job, but having some stability and something to hold for my own would be a great reward, and a much more palatable one to be under the domain of one I respect.
All right, and that, I believe, is the tale of the Battle of Winter's Teeth Pass. So thank you very much, my excellent players. Sorry we didn't have more time, but I thought it was quite excellent as it was. So I will go off the air if you have any parting comments for our viewers, and there won't be many viewers, but...
Okay, see you, gotta go. Bye.
That's all.